Neuroscientists are rethinking how we view ADHD. And for people like you and me, people who've been labeled with that trait for our entire lives, this is a game changer. This could change the way the entire culture treats us and looks at us and the way we think about ourselves and our place in the world. So in this video, I'm going to look at how they're repositioning ADHD and how they're thinking about it in a different way, relabeling it actually as hypercuriosity, and what that means for us and how we can apply this new understanding to our own lives. So let's get into it. So what is hypercuriosity? Recently, the neuroscience researcher from London College in England, Anne-Lauren Le Cunff, C-U-N-F-F, I hope I'm saying that right. So researcher in the Institute of Psychiatry and Psychology and Neuroscience at King's College London. She's also an author. And she wrote the article. I'm going to read a link down below so you can check it out for yourself. This article focuses on what she calls hypercuriosity. So what this article talks about is her applying the label of ADHD to herself and realizing for the first time that she has it, but she never thought of herself as having ADHD and never thought of it as a disability or a disorder. For her, she thought of it as a lack of discipline or a personal failing in some way. This is, I think, the first primary thing that's really important. I was labeled as ADHD when I was a teenager. My son was labeled with it too. Both of us have no problem functioning in society. Jobs, in our workplaces, we have perfectly normal and healthy relationships and friendships and community and family and all those things. So this isn't a disorder. This isn't something that makes us unable to function. Now, I don't want to detract from people who actually have a disorder. For if it makes it difficult or impossible for you to function without intervention from medical professionals like medication or special training or treatments or special environments or anything like that, then that is a disorder. But the first thing to understand is that this label, ADHD, gets thrown around as a disorder all the time. Instead of thinking things as neurodivergent, as diverging from normal, think of it more as a neurodifference. If we were all the same, we wouldn't progress as a species. That's why some people are tall, some people are short, some people are stronger, some people are faster. Some people have light skin, some people have dark skin. We adapt to different environments and circumstances in different ways. And this includes neurowiring, the way we're wired. And I want to separate that from the idea of personality. A neurotrait is a biological wiring to preference certain behaviors. That can influence our personality because that can make us act in a certain way. But it's not the same thing as nurtured personality trait. If you're raised in certain circumstances, you're raised to have certain beliefs, that's going to influence your choices as well. So there's kind of a difference between nurture and nurture there. And here we're talking about nature, genetics, epigenetics that cause us to behave in a certain way. And there's variation there. Things that are currently being labeled as divergent or disorders are actually really just on a spectrum of different traits that we all inherit to different degrees. If it's not disrupting your life and making it impossible for you to live without some sort of intervention, it's not a disorder. We can take the disorder out of that. Instead of ADHD, just ADH, attention deficit hyperactivity. And if it's not a disorder, then what is it? Dr. Cunff, I don't know how to say that name. I'm sorry. Doctor, if you're watching this, I apologize. Hit me up and tell me how to pronounce your name properly. I'd love that. If it's not a disorder, what is it? It's the brain prioritizes certain things over other things. This has to do with dopamine and serotonin and all kinds of other neurochemicals. But what we know is that different people have different neurochemical responses to the same stimulus. And in the case of people who are high sensation seeking or highly curious, their brains prioritize novelty and new information. Somebody whose brain prioritizes novelty over comfort and familiarity is going to be more curious. And this goes hand in hand with what we know about high sensation seeking, which is a specific trait in biology that influences our personality. So it's a psychological trait. And I talk about it in some other videos. I'll leave a link down below. So if we look at somebody who we've labeled with attention deficit as having high curiosity, the things that we're labeling as attention deficit disorder or ADHD is actually just symptoms. And the behaviors come out in specific environments, but they don't come out in other environments. This is the other thing that's really important to understand. You're unable to focus in environments that are boring. But when your curiosity is triggered, you're focused. You're down that rabbit hole. You are 100% to the point where you lose track of time. You go into flow. Like, it's bliss. You don't even realize what's going on. That's not a lack of attention. That's specific attention. People who are labeled with this are absolutely capable of direct attention and focused attention for long periods of time, just when their curiosity is piqued. And their curiosity is piqued more often by novelty. Whereas people without this trait, they're able to focus their attention on things that are repetitive and familiar and comfortable. So they're getting their dopamine hits and their serotonin hits from different stimuli. They both serve a purpose. In fact, noted in the article is that, and the novelty-seeking genetics are more present in nomadic communities than they are in sedentary communities. And what I find really interesting about this, as she's describing the traits of all of this, I don't hear ADHD. I hear HSS and HSP, which is two sets of traits. HSS is high sensation seeking, and HSP is highly sensitive person or sensory processing sensitivity. And in a small subset of the population, about 5 to 7%, both of these traits overlap. Those are people who are very curious and they want to explore experiences, but they also think deeply about them and process them and draw new conclusions and understandings from their explorations. And this is how we invent things. This is how we come up with new technologies and explore new ideas. This is exactly the traits, this kind of creativity that pushes humanity forward. And yet we're labeling it as a disorder. That's a problem. That's a big problem. So what does this mean for you? What do you do with this information? Well, if you've been labeled ADHD, you need to rethink what that means. You need to begin to reprocess it as not as a disorder, but as a trait that you have that gives you special abilities in certain areas. All these things come with advantages and disadvantages. And we already know the disadvantage. The getting bored in meetings, the fidgeting, the losing focus when you're on a deadline. Those are disadvantages. But in the right circumstances, it's an advantage, because when your brain is triggered, when you find that new thing, you go down that rabbit hole, you make connections, you discover new things, you think of new ideas, and you bring those back into the world and share them with other people, and you push humanity forward. So what you can do to begin rethinking this is to begin make a list of the two types of circumstances. One, where you become really focused. Go back through your life. Think about those times when you got really into a particular subject, whether it's just when you got into a flow state for one afternoon, or when you got really curious about a new thing and started a new hobby. If you're like me, you've accumulated a list of hobbies and interests that you've explored, discarded, returned back to, discarded again, and then it doesn't really apply to anything else in your life until it does. Begin to make a list and an understanding of those circumstances that actually cause you to focus, get really excited about something, and where attention is no longer a problem. Because the more you can understand what circumstances trigger that in yourself, the more you can design your life around that. You can design your work around that to create that situation more often. And that's one way you can turn this trait into an advantage. And also do the opposite. Carefully look at situations in which you have a hard time focusing, where you get bored, where you get fidgety, where your mind wanders. What are those situations? Because the more aware of them you are, the more you can also begin to create boundaries and structures to limit your exposure to those situations or to avoid them. So take the time to begin to understand the circumstances in which you focus best and the circumstances in which you have the most difficulty focusing. Doing this exercise will give you a chance to rethink what you were told was a disability into a trait and how to use it to your advantage. So like I said earlier, to me, this sounds like high sensation seeking combined with high sensitivity. If that sounds like you and you've never heard of that, I did a whole video on exactly that. I'll leave a link down below, and you should check that one out next, because that might help you understand yourself even better. Get away from the idea that you have a disorder or a disability and begin to think of it as a trait and understand how to use it to your best advantage. All right, I'll talk to you in the next video. Check out the link down below.